DJ Lagway might play on Saturday, Billy Napier said. Like, that is... He got taken off on a cart in the Georgia game. But if DJ Lagway can play Saturday, I think that makes a difference. And I don't know if DJ Lagway is going to play against Texas on Saturday. But the way Billy Napier was talking makes me think DJ Lagway might play against LSU next week, which, whether he plays on Saturday or is not able to play till next week, either way, I think it reshapes the conversation around Billy Napier. So here's what he said. He said, the good news, we've had some positive information on that front. That's the positive thing. We do think the injury is less significant. We think there's a pathway for recovery and return. Later, he said, we've not completely ruled him out. And he's talking about for Saturday against Texas. And I think a lot of that will be determined as we move our way through the week. So that's a good thing for all involved, and certainly for DJ. It's going to be pretty clear cut once we get to Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So we'll know. So I would watch that SEC availability report on Wednesday. Let's see where they put him. They might rule him out, or they might have him as doubtful, or who knows, questionable or probable. We'll see. But I think that's certainly something to pay attention to, because it does reframe the Billy Napier question if he can play, right? Ari, I mean, we thought if it's QB3 going against this murderer's row that they have these next 3 weeks, that it's probably going to look pretty bad, even if the defense is playing well.
Okay, so I had a weird thought last night. I was thinking about this.
Go for it.
And I knew I was going to save it for the show, and I'm excited. But let me preface it by saying that there's no question that it's great for DJ, right? Like, we are always wanting any player who gets injured to come back as healthy and be back to themselves as quickly as possible.
Correct.
We do not root for injuries in any stretch of the imagination, because the human element's more important than the game. That said, for the optics standpoint, when it comes to Billy Napier's job, if DJ is unable to play against Texas and against some of the other big time teams that this team is playing, and Florida loses or even gets blown out, but plays respectfully with their third stringer, optically speaking, is that more acceptable from people who will ultimately decide Billy Napier's fate than having DJ playing and also losing or getting their butt kicked?
Like, what I think getting smoked repeatedly gets him fired, regardless of how that happens.
Okay.
If it happens with DJ playing, it absolutely happens. But even if DJ isn't playing, you get smoked 3 times in a row here, you're probably done. If you win, like, here's my thing, and this is what I've been cruising the Gators online message boards and looking at what people think. There's definitely a couple of camps. There's one camp that's absolutely get rid of him, he doesn't win. And there's another camp that says, look, this team is playing better. They play hard for him. They've gotten better on both lines of scrimmage as the year's gone on. Isn't that what you said he had to do? And so I understand where both are coming from. I tend to lean toward the you gotta win at some point group, because that's the job. That's why you get paid bajillions of dollars, to win. So you gotta win some of these. And if DJ can play, which he should not play if he's not fully healthy, but if he can play and they win, then I think that reframes the conversation. If they were to beat Texas or LSU or Ole Miss, or multiple of those, there's a legitimate conversation to be had. If they don't, I don't know if there is.
So your pathway to Billy coming back next year is 1-3 in those games, or 1-2 in those games?
I don't even know if it's that. I think you might have to win 2 of them, but you have to win. Like, as a lot of the Florida fans have said, this camp, that I'll call them the no moral victories camp. And they're right. Moral victories aren't good enough at the University of Florida. You have to be winning. The job is to win.
Yeah. And the thing that's so crazy to me is that Florida had a legitimate chance, like a real life probably should have won the Tennessee game. And I feel like if they would have gotten that one and everything else about the season stayed the same, including how they played against Georgia, all those things, I think that this would be potentially an entirely different discussion, which shows you what the margin of error is when it comes to sentiment, right? Like, do you agree with that? Like, if they would have found a way to beat Tennessee, do you think that we would have a different thought of what needs to occur in the final month of this season for him to stay?
Especially given with what happened against Georgia. Yeah, I think we would. And remember what I said the night of the Tennessee game, after that game. I said, this is worse for Billy Napier than if he'd lost by 50, because they did have a chance to win. And the reasons they lost were his coaching decisions. Running a jet sweep on 4th and inches when you have a 240-pound quarterback. Not going for 2 at the end when you have the less talented team and you need to shorten the game. Like, those are his decisions. Those are his fault. I, of course, am wearing my Roback Performance tee, the long sleeve version. I love this shirt so much. I own 7 Roback Performance hoodies that are basically my favorite garments that I have relatives stealing pretty much constantly. But you've also got the polos, the quarter zips, the joggers. The new jogger material is so comfortable. If you're not wearing Roback, you are missing out. It is the most comfortable, versatile, just awesome athleisure that you can get. So if you'd like to get your collection started, use the code Andy and get 20% off your first order. That's roback.com, RHOBACK.com, and load up, because this is perfect performance hoodie weather. This is long sleeve tee. This is perfect weather for that. This is the time. So use that code Andy, get 20% off your first order. Roback.com, RHOBACK.com. So,
Andy, if LSU beats Alabama on Saturday, Florida will have played in a row Georgia, Texas, LSU, and Ole Miss, all of whom have their and Ole Miss. If Ole Miss wins on Saturday, that's 4 playoff teams potentially in a row. And then correct. 2 weeks previously, you had to go on the road and play in Knoxville. Like that, I don't know that I have ever seen a harder schedule before.
Nope. And we said that going into the year that it was going to be that.
Any year.
Yep. Said that going into the year. So, again, if you can win some of these, there's a conversation to be had. I think you got to win them.
There's a third camp, too, that you didn't mention in there. Okay. And this is the camp that I'm in.
All right.
Billy is a wonderful guy. By all accounts, people seem to love him. He'd probably be a great representative of the University of Florida if he were to be successful and be the coach there for a long time. That said, there are 2 things that you need to do in this job, which is 1, win. But the other thing that leads to winning is recruiting. And he doesn't do that. Now, they've had nice classes that have fallen apart, but he hasn't done good enough in the acquisition of talent in the portal. And he hasn't done good enough in high school recruiting, especially considering the fact that Florida is a wide open state right now. And Mario Cristobal is showing, a few hours south.
What you can do if you do both well. Yes.
So to me, if you're not doing the recruiting and talent accumulation piece, then all you're doing is setting yourself up for reoccurrence of what occurred this year. And if we are talking about DJ Lagway's health, and we've been discussing a true freshman quarterback's fate as a direct link to whether or not he's going to be able to keep his job, that means you're over-reliant on one player. Your roster isn't good enough from top to bottom. And to me, that is the biggest offense of anything that you could even describe. Not almost beating Tennessee or losing, not losing to Miami the way that you did. The reason why this is happening is because of the failure that you did not equip your roster with enough good players. And that in the SEC, that at Florida, that anywhere else that expects to win at the level that Florida does is just not good enough. And I think we already have our answer for that, regardless of what happens in the next 3 weeks.
Well, that said, we're in a different era where you can just buy a bunch of players. So that part maybe fixable. But I agree with you, because I said this going into the Georgia game. If your fate in year 3 is tied to one player, you're already screwed. Like,
And, like, they're
at,
playing
at
hard.
the end of year 3,
playing,
your fate should not be tied to one player.
They're playing hard. They're playing well under him, right?
Yep.
If he would have done the recruiting piece or the portal piece, imagine playing hard and playing close against these teams if they had 5 more elite level players on their team.
Well, they'd be winning.
They'd be winning a bunch of these games, and they might actually be in the playoff discussion. So, like, the moral victory people are probably right in this, and that it is very, like, and I think that he deserves credit for the team staying, like, locked in, right? Like, we've seen a lot of teams
absolutely.
in Florida's situation just punt and lose all their games, or not seem to care, no emotion, all that stuff. Like, Florida plays with emotion. They are still bought into his message. And I think that like, that piece is really important in a piece that we forget about. So he deserves a lot of credit for keeping his team bought into the mission. But this is just not a roster that you would anticipate would be Florida good. And you said people are asking you the entire offseason, is Florida going to be good? Are they going to be better? You live there, and you've covered teams that had Florida good players. And this team just does not have it. So whose fault is that?
No, they're playing hard, and they're playing. They've gone from playing kind of where I thought they were going to be to playing way above where I thought they'd play. But it's not like what Florida needs to do, and I don't know that the current Florida administration will allow this to happen because they're just not. It's not their style. But they need to push all in the way Ohio State and Ole Miss did, and just go buy a really good roster to put around DJ Lagway. If you're gonna keep the coach, which I think the athletic director Scott Strickland wants to do, because that is probably his best path to longevity. If you're gonna keep the coach, then go buy him a roster, like exactly what Ole Miss did, exactly what Ohio State did. Like use half of what you were going to pay because remember, if you fire Billy Napier, it's a $26 million buyout, $13 million due up front. Use half of that $13 million to supplement whatever you were doing in NIL. Rev share's coming. So come, next football season, that money's going to kick in, and buy a roster. Like, that's the other path. I just can't see Florida doing it. I'm going to have a column about that later on On3. That you probably read that tomorrow morning at On3, because I'm going to explore all of those possibilities a little more, because I find it fascinating, Ari. I find it very interesting.
2025 Florida football schedule, Saturday, September 20th.
It's the same as this schedule, but reversed.
Yep. Miami in week 2, Georgia week 4, Florida State week 5, Tennessee week 6, Texas.
Georgia's
week
not
7.
week 4.
Whatever. It's the 4th game.
Georgia's Halloween weekend.
Okay. Yes. Then we have Tennessee, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, and A&M all in a row. With a game with you against Kentucky in the middle there. Oh, it's up here. I'm looking at something else. I should have known that River.
Well, that's the 2024 schedule. But if you flip where they play the SEC games, then you have the Miami game. Then you have the 2025 schedule.
But Florida State's also on there. What if Florida State
and Florida State, right? And Florida State will be coming to Gainesville. Yeah. So, yep, it's going to be a very tough schedule again. It's going to be the same thing. So you have to decide, do you want the same thing, or can you get something different with the same guy, or do you need a new person to get something different? I'm telling you, the next few weeks are going to be really interesting. I think I'm going to go to that Florida LSU game because I am fascinated by that entire situation. I think
the path to them being good next year is shorter by keeping him and buying better players.
I know. That's why this is so interesting, because we keep looking at all this stuff through the old lens, and there's a new way to look at it now. And we have to consider the new ways.
And what's a better use of money? Because at least with a buyout, that's dead money.
Yeah, now you're paying the buyout again next year, but it's lower.
But I'm saying, like, as long as you're paying out a salary to a person who is working, and then you use the allocated funds that would have otherwise been dead money to improve the roster, he clearly has shown that he can get his team to play hard. He's proven that this year, right? You go get two or one explosive wide receivers. Their young running back on this team is incredible. He's going to be great if he's around next year.
Yeah, Jaden Baugh.
He's awesome. Get a few really good defenders, and you have yourself a team that can compete. Now the problem is that if you're making an investment, and I know we're spending a lot of time on this, but I think it's interesting.
It's interesting.
If you make an investment, you also want to look at the forecast of the maturation of that investment and see like rainbows and sunshine. And it's like the thing that Ole Miss did is very different because Ole Miss invested all that money into a crappy schedule. Like if you invest all that money and you're much better, but you go 8-4 next year with the players that you get, is that money well spent?
Right.
Like,
and you could theoretically have a really good roster,
really good team and go 8-4.
Still go 8-4 against that schedule. You're right.